That's right. It's time for another edition of the Kauffman Corner Podcast with you, the good doctor, Rany Jazayerli, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHP in Kansas City. We are very fortunate to have the editor-in-chief of Baseball America is going to join us here in a minute. We're going to talk about the Royals farm system. JJ Cooper is the best. Talked to him for many, many years. Rany and I both spoken to him for a long time. Rany, I'm sure, knows him way better. I would never claim to, know somebody better than Rany. So we know that, but we'll talk to one of our favorites, Baseball America, of course, great publication of the guy. Editor-in-chief is going to join us in it. We'll get into the Royals farm system. JJ Picollo turning this thing around. Brian Bridges. Is it improving overall? We do it right here, right now on the Kauffman Corner Podcast.
You're listening to the Kauffman Corner Podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kauffman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and a former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kauffman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. And now, here are your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
All right, thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Rany, one of our favorites, JJ Cooper, going to join us here. A lot of ground to cover, no time to waste. Anything you want to say about JJ before we bring him on?
I don't want to say that
I didn't hear you.
Yes, I know. I don't want to say that I know him better necessarily, but I did meet him for lunch at Oklahoma Joe's, now Joe's Kansas City, prior to the Futures game in 2012. So I believe legally that makes us related.
Let's find out if that is the case. JJ Cooper joins us here. JJ, how are you?
Good. And I kind of along those lines, like I love Justified. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. And, if you've ever seen that show, there's kind of this love-hate relationship. I don't have a love-hate relationship with Rany, but this one, the protagonist, you have, the marshal, and then you have the bad guy, but who's really kind of really good in some ways, and you root for him too. And they always end up kind of helping each other all the time. They say they dug coal together, and I would say that we ate barbecue together.
Yeah.
Before the greatest, I will say still the best Futures game as far as fans embracing it, fans being excited about it. I've been to probably 15 of them now, and there was a lot of fans that dodged the Dodgers, the Future game of the Dodgers. That was because Bad Bunny was in the celebrity softball game. Most of them actually did not care what was going on until Bad Bunny arrived. At Kauffman for the Royals Futures game, it was something where they were living and dying on every pitch, and that was really cool to see.
Yeah, Rany had pretty good seats for that. I can't remember how he got them, but
I have no recollection of that whatsoever, Soren.
Yeah.
Were you there?
I think I was. I think it might have been next to you. I don't know. We'll see if we can jog our memories.
We almost got sprayed by fractured lens glass when Will Myers hit a foul ball directly behind home plate and shattered the ESPN camera. So yeah, we had good seats.
Yeah,
it's amazing how many players from that game are no longer had big league careers and now are retired. It just
it is. It makes you feel old, is what it does.
Undefeated.
Tell me, how about let's just start with this, JJ. Is the Royal system making progress? Is it improving, and if so, by what kind of rate?
I would say yes, and there are two key things I would say with that. One is I do think we do a thing called draft report cards, and we do every year with it. We call it that because that's something that we've been doing since Alan Simpson, the founder of Baseball America, started doing them in 1983. And I get it. We're not going to change the name because that's the name we've used now for 40 plus years. But at the same time, I get it. We every year hear the criticism, but there's not a grade here, which I will say, if you are grading a baseball draft before most of the players have ever played an official game as a pro, you're probably doing something like a little bit too ahead of the curve. But I would say, so I'm going to say, like, I don't want to say with any draft from the 2025 draft, oh, they just hit it out of the park, because we have to see what these players do, in pro ball, and what they do really next year. You'll have starting to get a sense. But I do think that you look at this Royals draft, you look at what the Royals the last couple of drafts have been like, you add into that, I think really probably more than anything, some of the international signings that they've had in recent years. I do think that there is a little bit more kind of higher ceiling talent here. That a lot of cases is far away, long ways away. But then you do filter in, like, again, a guy like Jac who flew through the system. And I will say, like, it's funny because I think that some fans may look at it and rightfully be like, oh no, Jac is, for everything he did in the minors, he was pretty bad at times in the majors. And I did actually, not me, but one of another guys for us talked to a scout before Jac ever came up, and he said he needs to be in the big leagues. And he said, do you think he's ready for that? He goes, oh no, he's not ready at all. But Jac, the only way that Jac Caglianone is going to be taught the lessons that he needs to learn is by being in the majors, because he can dominate AAA with what he's doing. And the lessons he's going to get taught have to be presented to him at the major league level, so that the game then teaches him the adjustments he needs to make. So this, I would say, that scout, even before he reached the majors, would not be surprised by what Jac's MLB debut looked like. So I'd say little pieces like that. And then big picture, the key thing I would say, the thing that many teams are trying to do, if you have one of the best players in the game playing shortstop for you for many, many, many years to come, who should be in the prime of his career for many, many years to come. And then you put, to the Royals' credit and Michael Garcia's credit, a Gold Glove winning third baseman who's very productive right by him. You have this kind of foundation where you say, okay, we've seen it already. Bobby Witt Jr. can have a season that kind of carries a team to the postseason, not single-handedly, but on his shoulders. Now that means, okay, you've done the hardest part. Finding a player who can be an 8-WAR player, a 7 to 8 WAR player in a good year, is the part that most teams never, don't do in a decade. Once you have that, now can you find the pieces to go around that to be a playoff team?
Yeah. Go ahead, Rany. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really good point that I think gets lost in the discussion of the Royals when we talk about the farm system. I know when I was at Baseball Prospectus, we used to at the end of our top 10 prospect rankings, we would have a little blurb at the bottom ranking the top 10 players in the organization who were 25 and under, because I think so many times, defining a player as a prospect or not a prospect simply based on did he have 130 at bats on the majors or 131 at bats, sometimes it's too binary. You have to look at the organizational talent as a whole, young talent with a chance to improve. And very few teams in baseball have a top two on the caliber of Bobby Witt and Michael Garcia. And Michael really, I think, thrust himself into that conversation this year. But on that note, you talk about the draft, even though it's very, very early, the what you saw from the 2025 selections you like. And then, the year before, obviously, Jac Caglianone, and we'll get into David Shields and some of the other guys. The big difference here was Brian Bridges was hired as the scouting director prior to the 2024 season. Early returns seemed very positive on him, and we were positive when they hired him just based on his background, his experience with the Braves and the Giants, and the kind of the focus that he has in terms of the types of players he's looking for. But what is your sense of how the Royals are doing things maybe differently with Brian Bridges, and like how successful they've been with that so far?
I would say, and again, like looking at what he's done, going back to his time to those previous stops, like he has a pretty good track record of understanding what he's looking for, what his organization is looking for, and then hitting on it, right? Which, okay, it sounds, that sounds really basic, but at the same time, that is a place where sometimes the disconnect really starts. And I think it's a little better now in most cases. I just got done recording a podcast that we did about how to fix the Rockies. So I may be in a the worst of dysfunctions kind of mindset, because like there are organizations. So I use this story. This is a long ago story, but I will never forget the Orioles, back when the Orioles were as dysfunctional as any organization could be. This is years ago, but the Orioles drafted Jeff Fiorentino, and he was this outfielder who was pretty athletic, bat was decent and all that. And you talked to their scouting department at the time, and they said, we really think that he's going to be really can develop as a catcher. We like him. We drafted him because this is a guy who has all the pieces you need to be a catcher in pro ball. And we think that bat as a catcher will be really productive, like his athleticism. Then you talk to the player development side, farm side, and you say, so with Fiorentino, are you moving him to catcher? And they said, no, he's an outfielder. And that's what he was. He was an outfielder so you literally had an organization where one side was buying the groceries and bringing them, and then the other side was like, no, we're going to make a vegetarian meal, but the groceries that we bought were basically sausages. Like that kind of level of like dysfunction. That doesn't happen very often anymore. But what I would say though is you do really, as an organization, kind of have to know like where you are and what you can kind of do, because some organizations can do things better than others. And I do think that you look at, there's been a little bit of blend here, but I think this most recent draft really does stand out from the standpoint of, okay, getting some further away but high ceiling shortstops, right? Like, I got to see Josh Hammond play at NHSI this year. Sean Gamble, like these are guys who it is not going to be ETA 2026 or probably not 2027. If it's 2028, that's really good. But at the same time, you are talking about players who really do have like not just everyday regular, but could be above average, could be, if everything clicks, all-star caliber players. And I say that because, like, look, rewind it a few years ago when they took Frank Mazzucato, like you had to that was a top 10 pick, but you really did kind of have to lay out, like, there were guys who liked him. We saw him a lot because he was in the Northeast, and we have a number of people in the Northeast, but it's like, even if you saw him at his best, it's like, he's going to have to do this and this and this to put it all together. It was like a lot of pieces, where if you talk about a Gamble, you talk about a Hammond, you say, well, what do they need to do? It's like, okay, what we saw in high school, they need to just do that in pro ball, which is a big jump, a big gulf. You're going to have to see if they can, but it's a little less of a to-do list than there's been in some other cases in the not too distant past.
You mentioned their most recent picks. I mean, what about why being that far down? Why do you think they're above average? Could be not just everyday guys, but above that. Usually speaking, and maybe it's me being a Royals fan and seeing like, oh, Nick Prado, like, okay, yeah, we're down here, we're not in. Because we've seen a lot of guys where there's a bunch of hype. Right, because the Royals have had so many high picks, and then you get down to guys, and you're like, well, geez, we're hoping to, Billy Butler was like a great success story for the Royals for one of the handful of years they didn't pick up really, really high. He at least got and was a productive bat, didn't have a place to play, but he was a legitimate big league hitter. What is it that makes these guys shine, and why were they available when the Royals picked this time?
Well, one thing, both of them ended up being basically, one was almost a $4 million bonus and one was a $3 million. So that's like, so the asking price is a key part of this. And that's one of the things that always gets tricky with the draft nowadays is like some teams, have the bonus pool money to do that. Some don't. But the other thing I would say is like, so, okay, with Hammond, let's start with him because he's the one I saw in person. Like it could, I know he's a shortstop for them, but I would say one of the things with him is there was some debate, at least I would say early in the draft process. Is this a pitcher or is this a shortstop? It kind of became a little bit more clear as we got closer and closer to the draft. No, this is a shortstop. But so there's a little bit there of, again, that can go either way, but you do see, the Royals are developing him. We heard this with Jac, though. With Jac, it was like, oh, he's a two-way player. And again, Jac never pitched a minute in his pro career. It's really hard to do that. But you do see sometimes the players who were two-way players find another gear when they then are able to focus on one and not the other. Now, I would say that more often that happens with the college guys than the high school guys. often, especially recently, I would say it happens a lot with the college pitchers. When you talk about Nolan McLean, with the Mets, he found another gear. It's like, well, why did he find another gear? He stopped trying to hit homers. It does allow you to focus on it more. But you are talking about, in both cases here, I would say that you are talking about guys who cheap 5 tools, I guess would be the way to put it, where it's like, if everything breaks right, I don't know if there's a 7 on either of these scouting reports, 7 being that near the top of the scale grade, but there's a lot of 55s and 60s potentially. And the worst grades could be 50s, right? Now, we talk about the hit tool for a high school draftee. That is the hardest tool to project. That's the hardest tool to evaluate. So if that's why I say, like, there's a part of this where it's like, we'll know a lot more at this time next year than we do now. Go out for a full season, you hit 210, you're probably not going to be a 50 hit tool. You go out for a full season, you hit 320, you're probably going to be, like, again, like, to take an example, I don't think that Sean Gamble or Josh Hammond has this in them. But if we were talking at this time last year about the Pirates and we talked about Connor Griffin, we would say all the tools are exceptional. There's real concerns about his hitting ability. He goes off in that off season, reworks his swing, takes, cleans it up and all, and then goes out as one of the best hitters in the minor leagues, goes low A, high A, double A. Boom, he's the number 1 prospect in baseball. And we're talking about, like, he's not just the number 1 prospect in baseball. Like, okay, how does he compare to Bobby Witt Jr. kind of comparisons? That's the kind of thing where there's the part where I love doing this. And there are parts of this that have become easier because there's more data. There's more ability. When I started doing this, you never saw video of a player. You could not find video of a draftee or an amateur player or even a pro player in the minors most of the time. I remember having conversations where someone would get to the big leagues and it's like, I've been talking about this guy for 3 years, but he looks a little different than I expected him to, because all I'd seen was a photo of him before. Now you've got video of all these guys and you can see him. I think I've seen 85 of our top 100 in person now. It's easier to do that stuff. But the thing that's more difficult is now players go off for the off season as one thing, and they come back sometimes as a completely different thing, which is great. It's but that used to be, the off season used to be, you hope there's a team that they didn't show up 40 pounds overweight. And now it's like, they show up as like, hey, I'm throwing 4 miles an hour harder than I was before. Or, hey, by the way, what do you think about my swing? I did this and I cleaned it up and I feel like now I can really get to my power and I can handle that inside fastball in a way that I couldn't. They're using the off seasons to really kind of do the experimentation, the training, all these aspects of it kind of in the lower pressure, lower intensity time to then hopefully start next year further than they were when they ended this year. That was not the case nearly as much 20 years ago.
Oh, that's a lot.
Sorry, I get wordy.
No, it's great. I'd like we should just
Rany, let's be honest. JJ, let's be honest. Let me pull the curtain back. He just couldn't remember which one of us asked the last one. That's what happened there.
I was going to say we should just like, JJ, the podium is yours and let him talk for an hour.
Yeah, I agree.
I can go get some coffee. I wanted, let's get back to Jac Caglianone because like he's technically not a prospect. And so when we talk about like where the Royals rank in terms of like organization, when you rank your organizations before the season, there will have to be an asterisk by the Royals because I'm assuming he would have been a top 20 guy had he qualified if he stayed in the minor leagues. But at the same time, you can't ignore what he did at the major league level. And, he hit like 157. And it's at first it seemed like he was just hitting it a tough luck. And by the end, he just seemed like he was kind of lost. So I'm curious from your perspective, just how good were the scouting reports when he was in the minor leagues? Like, what was it just like, this is a guy who, is, I don't want to say a quadruple A guy, but a guy who's beating up on AAA competition, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate to the majors? Or was he legitimately getting scouts saying this guy's a future star in the major leagues? And then do you have any idea of what happened? I know you talked to a scout who expected this to happen. So I'm curious what insight you might have on that.
So the crazy thing is so I'll start with this, right? Which is I feel like that the Jac Caglianone season we saw, I'm not the scout. I'm not that smart, but I will say, isn't that unexpected, right? Because coming out of Florida, I would say that what the best way to put it is he has some real swing decision issues at times, but at the same time was a guy who was so strong, had such ability to drive the ball on pitches where it's like, oh, like, again, I don't like saying Vlad Guerrero Senior, I don't remember Jack ever hitting a homer on a ball that bounced, but like that kind of level of like, I don't know if he should have swung at it, but it's hard to argue with it because it was a double, that kind of thing, right? And I do feel like we kind of saw like some extent of that. Like, I do feel like that what we saw at the major league level, there is a little bit of bad luck that was a component of it, right? Like, when you get into the expected stats, it can get a little dicey, especially when we're talking about small sample size theater. Like, what is 200 is less than 250 plate appearances, but his expected WOBA last year was above league average, right? In the majors. Now, I think his expected slugging percentage was like 430. Well, again, now if Jac Caglianone slugs 430 for his career, he's probably not going to be a very valuable player. Let's just be clear. It won't be terrible, but he's not going to be a great defender in the outfield. He's probably going to strike out a good bit. But the thing I'll say about it is like some of these other aspects of it weren't as bad as I kind of feared, right? Like, it is weird. He hit a $157. That's terrible. Like, that is not something where you can, if he does that again next year, again, I can understand, Soren, where you're talking about the ghost of Nick Prado bouncing around in your head, right? Because now I'll say Nick Prado couldn't hit. If Nick Prado hit two balls together, I think that his, an average hit would probably equal one Jack, like, blast, because like that was not Prado's game in the same way. But if you told me that Jac Caglianone hit $157 in the majors, I would say, okay, and you said, what was his strikeout rate? My guess would be 42%, 43%, right. Some number there that you would say, oh, okay, that's not sustainable. There's no, like, if you kind of do that, you're probably not going to be able to get from there to being a productive player. I was talking about this with some others, but like, again, Spencer Jones being the most fascinating player of the minors, in some ways the Yankees prospect. And it's like, when you talk about players who strike out 35+% of the time, the challenge of how much you have to do with that other 65% is remarkable to be a productive player. But you look at Jack and it's like, okay, the strikeout percentage was not great, but it wasn't horrific. There were some walks in there. He does hit the ball hard, even though he didn't hit many homers as maybe we would expect. Like, there's all these components where it's like, okay, we go back to the development, the offseason development we're talking about. He's now seen what I was doing. I have to improve. I don't think it's going to be that we're going to see in 2026, he's going to hit 40 homers and he's going to hit 270. But I do think that we will see real steps along those lines, right? Like, I do think the power I think we saw is absolutely real. And when you talk about, to answer your question, Rany, when you talk to people in the minors who saw him in the minors, it's like that power really is exceptional. That is, you don't get extra point. You don't get two runs for a 500-foot homer, a 480-foot homer. But at the same time, obviously, if you hit a ball 115, it means that you can miss a ball a little bit and still maybe hit it out. Whereas if you hit a ball 105, you're going to have to do everything right to hit it out. And okay, that one I missed a little bit. That was 98 off the bat. And you're like, yeah, and that was a fly ball. Yeah, that's not a Jac Caglianone problem. So I would say that, like, when you consider how quickly he moved, I'm not stunned by the season he had. And I'm still pretty optimistic. Like you did, the other thing you said, Rany, like, yeah, I think he would still be a top 25 prospect, probably top 30. Like, I think if you accounted for the 157 batting average in the majors, that we're wrapping that all in, that would obviously ding him down a little bit. But like, he's older than Bryce Eldridge, but Bryce Eldridge to me and Jac Caglianone are kind of similar types of prospects of what you expect them to be, the Giants first baseman. And so with that, like, I'm still pretty encouraged. And the fact that he didn't kind of he did not set the world on fire. He kind of dumped cold water on it. It would be the opposite of it in his big league debut. But I don't also want to forget what he did this past season in the minors, which was exceptional at the same time. And yeah, the majors is what will be on his, baseball card in the long term and the baseball reference page. And you have to click an extra tab to see what he did in the minors. No one really, Mike Hessman, cares, like you want to see that, minor league home run leader. But for most people, you only care about the major league stats. I'm not feeling like, okay, I'm much more discouraged about him now than I was a year ago.
What about Carter Jensen? Rany is literally giddy about Carter Jensen. I mean, is there anything not to like? Is there a reason to hold back? The one thing we've talked about is if for some reason he gets to the big leagues and can't catch, because we saw him bring MJ Melendez all the way to the big leagues, and then suddenly he's not a good catcher. Let's play him someplace else. Obviously, everything changes if he's got to go play a premium offensive position as opposed to being behind the dish. But should Royals fans be as excited? Should anybody have the legal right to be as excited as Rany Jazayerli is about Carter Jensen?
He is really pretty close to what you're looking for in a catching prospect. I got to be honest. Okay, so if we can, let's say like MJ Melendez, right? MJ Melendez, when he came to the majors, was a really high variance prospect because there were concerns about the defense, but he was really young. So you hope that you're going to see it, really step forward. MJ was part of, we talk about Nick Prado. The Royals had this little stretch there where they had some of the hardest to evaluate prospects you'll see, because they were players who had on their minor league resume seasons that you could describe as utterly disqualifying to being a big league player. MJ Melendez has a season on his minor league resume where you would say, that is not a prospect. You cannot hit this and go on to be a big leaguer. And then the next year after that, hey, turned it around. And again, and it ended up that you averaged those out okay, that was the depths of as low as it could get. And that was about that was about the peak of what he could do. And you average it out and then you can't really catch. And then you run into problems. I really feel pretty comfortable that Carter Jensen is going to be able to catch. I really feel like when we do our off-season updates of everything, that kind of gives us a chance to catch up. We've been trying to catch up on Carter Jensen because he kept moving up. I will tell you that when at the Futures game this past year in Atlanta, it was eye-opening because that's the best prospects in the game, right? That is Connor Griffin. That is Leo DeVries. That is you're talking about the players who you're okay, this is the cream of this is the top tier that you're looking at. And I love watching batting practice at it, not because batting practice is Joey Gallo puts on the best batting practice in the Futures game I've ever seen. That doesn't mean that Joey Gallo is the best player that came out of that or anything like that. But it does tell you something about a guy's power. And Jeff Ponce and I who were there were charting every home run and everything. And we both were like, Carter Jensen's putting on the best BP here. And I think when we got done, we were like, yeah, I think he was the star of batting practice. Now, and I say that because that was a surprise, right? Not that I expected Carter Jensen to do nothing in the BP there, but when he did, it was I'm seeing as much power, if not more, from him than I am from guys who are, considered some of the best power prospects in the minors. And this is a catcher. And then you see him when I've watched him catch again, it is a great question to ask because I do feel I feel like that we talk about how hard it is to evaluate hitting tools. Evaluating catchers, evaluating amateur catchers is I feel maybe we should examine entrails of animals or something. I feel like we're still at a really basic level because especially let's just lay it out this way, right? You're evaluating a high school catcher. Yes, during the showcase circuit, you may get to see him handle velocity somewhat, but even then it's okay, he's handling velocity often on pitchers who he shook a hand with when the inning started and said, what do you throw? And then said, okay, I'll put 2 down or I'll hit the pitch comm and tell him to throw that. But you have nothing you don't have that catcher pitcher bond. And then they go to high school and often they're catching guys where it's they could probably catch them barehanded if they needed to. And then you're saying, how is this catcher going to handle 101 that is over his head on one pitch and in the dirt on the next year. And how is he going to do it, by the way, going from catching a 20-game high school season and, showcases every now and then to, hey, by the way, it's a 140-game season. You're going to catch 75 to 80 of them. But by the way, also every day you're going to be in the bullpen before it because we've got 12 pitchers here and you've got to catch bullpens. And, oh, yeah, by the way, we're going to do some extra hitting work. And by July and August, we need you to not have melted into a puddle here in Arizona where it's 110. There's so many difficult components to it. The great thing for Carter Jensen is he's checked all those boxes. He's hit at every level. He's shown power. He's shown defense. I feel pretty comfortable that this is a guy who I feel crazy to ever say that someone's going to be Salvador Perez's logical replacement because that was Fermin and that was MJ Melendez and I think you could go back probably 2 more generations before that.
Right.
But it does seem like that this is Salvador Perez's logical replacement at catcher, the one who kind of eventually takes over in 2038 or whenever it is that Salvador Perez finally, ages out.
We're talking to JJ Cooper, editor-in-chief at Baseball America. We'll take a quick break, come back, get into the lower minors, also talk a little JJ Picollo with JJ Cooper next. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty, Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Your favorites are back, Kansas City, now for a limited time at all your Kansas City Whataburger locations. The Bacon Wrangler Double, 2 large beef patties, American Monterey Jack cheese, bacon, fried onion strings, pickles, and chipotle aioli sauce. Or how about the sweet and spicy bacon burger? 2 large beef patties, American and Monterey Jack cheese, bacon, grilled onions, and topped with sweet and spicy pepper sauce. Or grab the patty melt or even the honey barbecue chicken strip sandwich. They're all perfect with the Whataburger Dr. Pepper Blackberry Shake. Remember, Whataburger is open 24 hours a day with breakfast served from 11 p.m. to 11 a.m. And don't forget, you can get all your Whataburger favorites and more by downloading the Whataburger app with the QR code. Whataburger, proud sponsor of the Kauffman Corner Podcast.
So I just want to add one more thing about Carter Jensen, just because I can't believe this fact exists and we're not making enough of it. He hit the longest home run by any Kansas City Royal in the StatCast era in September, 482 feet. And maybe we should discount it because it happened in Sacramento, and it's a minor league park, and I don't know if they have minor league StatCast there or whatnot. But I feel like we just kind of ignore the fact that he hit a ball 482 feet. So I wanted to throw that out there.
That matches what I said. What I saw, I saw top tier raw power. Like, again, you can get Sully Matias will point out that you can raw power and productive big league power can be 2 different things, but it is something. Again, it is the best. I will also say, though, the best players in baseball at the major league level hit the ball exceptionally hard. If you look at the top of the EV, the top of the home run distance, Roman Anthony hit a ball 490 feet in AAA, and that did not make me feel that did not decrease my anticipation of what Roman Anthony is going to do, because being able to do that gives you a level. Again, it means that you don't have to hit the ball perfect to hit it out. It doesn't mean that, the 480 is kind of cool, but it's the fact that 480, like Junior Caminero, when I saw Junior Caminero in the minors and we put 80 power on him, which we don't do very often. One of the things that really made it where I was like, I felt comfortable putting 80 power on it was watching him in AA. He would flick balls opposite field for homers where you're like, okay, that was him just trying to stay alive, kind of like, oh, they're going away. It's a pitch away from me. I'm just going to flick it down the line. Home run. And it's like, okay, well, if you could do that, then you just have a level. You have an ability to hit homers that most guys can't hit, because we could talk about Isaac Paredes and how great he is about optimizing exactly so that he can pull the ball right down the line where he hits homers. That's great. He's gotten every ounce of power out of his ability. But if you have that ability to where you're like, I'm just going to throw the bat at it and it goes 360 feet to right field as and that's an opposite field homer for you. Well, then you can hit line drives that go out. You can hit balls to center that go out. You can do things. Carter Jensen can do things that most Royals hitters can't do, is what he's saying when you do, what you're saying when you see a stat like that.
Cioli Matias, JJ. That was a deep cut. Also a painful cut, but that was a deep
Sorry,
cut.
We talked Prado, Matias. I mean, come on.
I will say, again, Rany and I do go back, but starting covering the Royals, prospects, it was, I was very lucky that I'd been at BA for a few years, but Will Kimmey, who had done the Royals for us, he left to go to law school, if I remember correctly. And it's okay, Royals are available. And I raised my hand. And that was in, I would say which you all know much better than I do, but I would describe as the depths of despair time with the Royals, where, there was those years where I did just blank on the outfielder who got the 3-year contract, who you're oh, wait, there was that time when the Royals were signing free agents because it was this guy will take our money. I would say you could describe it as, and then, and so then it was,
you've got to be more specific, JJ. Yeah. There's a lot of errors.
Who was the free agent outfielder who
Jeff Francoeur?
No, before this, we're talking about 2004, 2005.
Oh, well, God, there were so many guys. There was
Juan Gonzalez.
Well, one Juan gone. Hold on, I will get this one.
Oh no, Jose Guillen.
Yes, there we go, Jose Guillen.
Yeah.
Okay.
That when that was the time where I started doing it, and then it was okay. Then they drafted Moustakas, they drafted Hosmer, and then it's oh, this is starting to got making trips to Kinston to see that Wilmington team and all, and it was oh, this is. And I will always say, to say my deep cut was that hurts is. I still have seen very few games better pitched than Mike Montgomery in High A. It was the game where you're I've seen everything I need to see here.
You were
but he did pitch the last out of the World Series. So,
Yes.
And Jeremy Affeldt got the win in Game 7 of the World Series at Kauffman Stadium. And if you had told me that in 2002, I would have lost my mind. And God has a sense of humor sometimes. So let's change gears. I want to ask you about the two most exciting pitchers in the farm system. So a couple weeks ago, Soren and I drafted our favorite prospects out of the system. He had the number 1 pick and took Carter Jensen. And I didn't want to take 2 pitchers with picks 2 and 3, and so I had a difficult decision to make. And I ended up taking Kendry Chourio over David Shields. But I'm very curious what your opinion is of those 2 guys who are very different. One's right-handed, one's left-handed, one's from Latin America, one's American, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of differences, but they both seem to have significant upside. I'm just curious what you're hearing and who you like more.
I probably would have taken Chourio first too. Yeah. And again, not that I would say right now at this time, if you said, give me odds on which one is more likely to be a big leaguer, I'd still probably say Shields by a little bit. But if you said, give me odds on which one's going to be a really impactful big leaguer, that's where I'm going Chourio. And this is where this gets tricky, right? I was just doing the Reds for us, for the Reds top 10. And at the back of that top 10, I was looking at another one of the best pitchers from the Arizona Complex League, what Chourio kind of was also. And I was looking at this other pitchers in AAA, and I'm like, which one I'm going to put? And I ended up going with the Starlin Torres, who's the rookie ball guy. And Chourio actually made low A, and Chourio pitched in the postseason in low A. But you don't want to go overboard in that polish, being more advanced than your age at the level that you are. You can overrate that, right? Because sometimes that just means that you've developed faster than others. I mean, I'm sure that every one of us can think of Ken Sykes was the guy at my little league who's he hit that growth spurt just before everyone else. And he was you did not want to face him, that kind of thing, right? We all have those sort of remember. And again, obviously it's not the same at pro ball level, but what I would say is that if you look at Chourio, one of the things that stands out so much is what I don't don't want to say refined pitcher because he can throw his changeup too often right now. There are things that he does where you're like, okay, you got a little bit too cookie cutter that inning. You could see what you were doing. But when you talk about the stuff that he has, you talk about the advanced secondaries that he has right now, the way that he can throw strikes and kind of just cruise through innings at times, to do that at that age really stands out. But I would say on top of that, it's kind of like the other part of it is that, okay, it could be that he's just more advanced than everyone else he's facing and doesn't really improve. And then you would say, you could look at this a couple of years now and go, he's still going to be a good pitcher then, because he can touch 97 right now. It's 93, 95. He's got secondaries. If he doesn't get any better as far as pure quality of stuff, it's still a big league assortment. But when you throw in his age and you say, okay, he's not skinny. He's pretty well built. But if you said there still probably could be a little bit more in there, if you add a little bit more refinement, if you add another pitch down the road or two more pitches down the road, which is not crazy when you consider a guy who has this advanced of an arsenal at that age, that's when I start getting really excited. And again, that's what's fun about this. This will never, y'all are the same way. This will never get boring because the answers are projections of probabilities. They're not answers. They're unknowable, right? Like I tell our staff, like when you're writing a guy, sometimes you're writing up prospects who could be one of the best players in baseball or could never make the majors. And what I try to describe it is okay, then lay that out to people so that if either of those happens, your write-up is still reasonably accurate, right? If he can fix this, then he could be great. Or if he can do this, but you can't do right now, he could be really good. In a case of Kendry Chourio, if he just keeps doing what he's doing, he could be a useful, and stays healthy pitcher. He could be a useful big league pitcher. But when you consider his age, if you say that he has normal development and maturation from here, well, then that gets really exciting because if we're saying that down the road he's sitting 96, 97, which isn't crazy in the world of modern pitching development, if you say, okay, he's got this really advanced curveball, his changeup's really advanced, but now he's added a sweeper to give him something that kind of goes the other direction, or he's working on a split, or he's working on, like now throws two seamers and four seamers to different parts of the zone, all these things that can happen. And by the way, you feel better about a guy like him doing that than most because the ability to spin a breaking ball and throw a changeup as a teenager means that you have some of that ability. Like the guys who you're like, oh, he hasn't really figured out how to spin it yet. They can probably find a breaking ball, but they're not going to be guys who are like, he's Yu Darvish. He throws 8 pitches now. Those guys don't start at, I can't figure out how to throw a slider as a 19-year-old. The guys who can do that are the ones who have kind of more of a wide array of things they can do. That's why Chourio excites me so much.
Yeah. And Shields, just your thoughts on him?
And I think Shields is really good. But when I'm comparing the two, I think that Shields just fits like a little bit more of your normal pitching prospect, if that makes sense, right? Like I would say that he fits that criteria of like, this is what you're looking for. Chourio fits that criteria of this is different than what you're normally looking for. Okay. So I'm going to ask y'all one question. So you had the first pick, Soren, and you took Jensen.
Yes.
So Rany, you went back to back with pitchers, right?
No, I took Chourio and Josh Hammond. Actually.
Okay. So then it went back to Soren. So Snake. Okay. So
I went Shields.
Okay.
Okay. And then I went Sean Gamble.
Okay.
And then Rany.
And then I took.
I have it if you don't remember, Rany.
I've got it here. Don't worry, I got it.
Okay.
I took Blake Mitchell, and is that somebody I definitely want to talk about? Blake Mitchell, and then I went a little safety over upside and took Luinder Avila, 6 and 7. So
okay.
And if you want to hear it, just because I think there's probably people now we've teased it. Here it is, real quick. Then I took Yandel Ricardo and Asbel Gonzalez. Rany.
I took Ben Kudrna and Ramon Ramirez.
And then I took Carson Rocafort and Drew Beam. starting pitcher.
Okay.
And then I cursed at Soren because I really wanted Carson Rocafort. We both like him. We'll probably want your opinion there. So then I finished with Michael Lombardi and Warren Calcagno.
And I
like the Lombardi pick, but and Calcano. I was going to say, I was hoping that we'd hear the Ramsell Medina or Warren Calcano going in this.
You'll hear them both because you heard he went Calcano, which upset me, and I took Ramsell Medina. And so, yes, we got all those guys in.
Okay. You all followed the draft philosophy like I would, right? Which is, and again, when we do the rankings, this is where this gets tough. And we're working on our off-season rankings right now. So this may change, right? But it's always easier on the rankings to kind of be a little slower on moving the DSL guys and the guys like that up because they haven't played the Arizona Complex League is a big step. And then low A is a big step. There's so many detours and off ramps and potholes they can hit. But then if you're talking about, okay, do I want to draft Gavin Cross or do I want to draft Ramsell Medina? It's not a hard decision because like the way that I would describe it is prospecting, like it's kind of a funnel. And when you sign, all the world's options are available to you. And it's like, he could be this, or he could be this, or he could be this. And then most of the time what happens is it's kind of like kids, right? When you talk about kids get so, like my kids would get at a young age would get so excited at the littlest things, right? Like they could be convulsing in laughter at me being slightly stupid for 2 minutes. And then as they get older, like that all narrows, right? And it's like, you get to my age and like for me to really belly laugh, like it takes something a lot. Well, when you talk about prospects, like by the time they get to Gavin Cross's age, you kind of know what they're going to be, right? And it doesn't mean that they can't find another gear or something like that, but it's like, it's hard to say, I think this guy might be a big leaguer, but I don't know if he's going to be a regular. Okay, what about this other guy? Oh, there's a 50% chance that we'll, struggle to remember his name in 5 years. However, there's also a 30% chance he's going to be a big league star, all-star, or 10% chance even. It's like, okay, give me the 10% chance on that. Makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like actually prospect lists, I'm curious what you think of this. Over the last 10 years, 15 years, I feel like it used to be you would never see a top 100 prospect list that had a guy like who was still in the Dominican Summer League or even in the Complex League. I feel like both Baseball America, but Prospectus, MLB Pipeline, et cetera, are much more like aggressive about sort of identifying that 17, 18-year-old player who has a chance to be special, putting them on top prospect lists early. And yeah, there are some, glaring mistakes. There was the Royals guy, what was his last name? Pena, the outfielder. He made a top 100 prospect list, and I don't think he ever hit like 200 in rookie
I'm
ball.
proud to say I don't think he made ours on that one.
Yeah, not yours. No, it was not yours. You are right.
But no,
but I feel like there are some great successes in that too. Like some guys who never would have made that list before turned into major league stars.
Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was kind of the gateway drug for us. The reports on Vlad when he signed were just absurd. And so, like, I think he's the first guy that I can remember that we put in the 100. I think we put in the 100. I don't think he may not have played a pro game at that point. And we're like, if this guy's half the hitter that every report is on him. And then, he's kind of been memory hold in the world, but understandably because of his legal troubles. But Wander Franco was the next guy where you're like, and again, hey, I should say there was one in between. There was, because Kevin Maitan was in between. Kevin Maitan is the danger of it in that the Kevin Maitan we saw as a 16-year-old was a great prospect. And then 2 years later, you look at Kevin Maitan, it's like the bat speed disappeared because he gained 40 pounds. And like the athleticism just disappeared. But I would say that now with all of this, like the job, like I said earlier, the job that we do at Baseball America is both incredibly harder and easier at the same time. And that goes to the DSL. Like we have had a guy, Josh Norris on our staff has gone to the DSL each of the last 2 years. And that is something that 10 years ago, I don't think we'd have ever even considered doing. But on top of that, like when you talk about like a Jesus Mate, who was high in our top 100 before he ever set foot in the U.S. But when you say, okay, well, why do you have a comfort level to do that? Well, there are some things about the DSL that you should utterly disregard. Someone will quote to me like, look at this guy's walk rate. And it's like, if you've ever watched a DSL game, I promise you could carry a 12% walk rate by not owning a bat. If you just stood and said, I challenge you to throw a strike, you would probably have about a 260 OBP just by like, I know I'm supposed to throw a strike, but I just can't do that yet. I'm 16, I'm 17 or whatever. Right. So there are stats like that where you're like, don't ignore that. But then now, like the way that the game is measured in a much more detailed way, we could not just look at Jesus Mate's strike zone knowledge, his zone contact rate, his chase rate, things like that, and know that those were exceptional for a 16, 17-year-old. And we could also compare it to past DSL players of the last 4 years, 3-4 years who've done it. It's like, oh, he's at the absolute like 98th, 99th percentile on that. And he hits the ball harder than anyone. And he's a shortstop. You start putting all these things together, and the scouting feedback we're getting is he's the best player in the DSL. Like we have more information on a player in the DSL now to kind of base a prospect ranking on than we would have had on a AA player a decade ago. Like that's where the game has really, like when I say like it really in some ways is like when Jackson Holiday was coming up, great prospect who has not full fruition yet at the big league level. I'm still a believer, but I was able to drill down on his defense when he was in the minors in a way that would never have been possible a decade before. I was able to dial up on Synergy, which we have, Synergy Sports, every defensive play pretty much that he made at shortstop or second base that year. And if you watch 150 plays from a guy, and I got to see him in person, I think 8 games that year, but if you would get to watch 150 plays for a player, the way that if you're watching the Royals, if you're listening to this and you're a Royals fan, you get to a level of understanding the strengths and weaknesses of a player defensively because you're seeing it game after game. And you would see with Jackson Holiday, he sets up at shortstop. He could shake hands with the third baseman. Why is that? And then you watch play after play and you realize, oh, he wants to be moving towards first base on every throw. Wait, let me dial up every throw he made from in the hole. Oh, he can't make that throw from in the hole. And that's where you can now, I was able to write a story explaining before he ever played a big league game, this is why he'll never be a big league shortstop, because he doesn't have a big league shortstop's arm. And it's and by the way, we also had data on him in AAA that said he averaged 82 miles an hour on his throws, and there's no shortstop in the big leagues who averages 82 miles an hour on his throws. Those are the kind of things that did not exist a decade ago. That would have been getting a note from a scout that says, hey, I don't like his arm. That would have been it. But you wouldn't know really nearly as much to base that on as much as I watched him throw 100 balls.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the amount of data makes everybody better, right? Theoretically, but it also seemingly should level the playing field. That's one of the things that I think, if everyone's got all the data, why aren't we all coming to the same conclusions? I want to ask you about JJ Picollo and what he's done, because it was not a popular announcement when they said that he was going to, first they kind of did it with a diet version. Hey, he's now the GM, we're going to, he's going to do the baseball stuff. But Dayton Moore quickly said when asked, well, when the final say, I've got the final say. And that really kind of didn't go over well. And then they continued to not win. Then JJ got put into the position. That wasn't the biggest, most popular thing ever. And then the first year was a really rough one. And, there was real frustration. And nothing's changed. The same old guy. Meanwhile, things were changing in-house. We didn't see it immediately at the big league level, certainly not in the wins and losses, but they were changing. How maybe unorthodox and how impressed should people be that he was able to do this, having been part of the old regime, to now modernize and make over the team?
I think it's an incredibly difficult job to do that. And I think we are seeing clear signs, not just that he's doing it, but also made changes, right? Because I think the toughest part of this, right? if you look at Paul Taboni going in and just took over the Nationals, hey, the Nationals have a GM who's hiring lieutenants and all that. As we're recording this, it's like as opposed to the Rockies, who have known that they were going to need a changeover for months and don't have a front office right now. That's kind of the sign of a dysfunctional organization. But like, if you are coming in fresh, you could change everything. And there's not even kind of any kind of psychic pain to it, right? There's not, I know if you're human, it could be tough coming in and saying, look, I know that you've devoted a lot of time to this organization, but we're going clean sheet here, or we're going to go in a different direction. And we're hiring this person or whatever for this job. Or it's always never easy. It shouldn't be easy. If it's easy to you, you probably don't have the right mindset as a human. Let's just say that. But think of how much tougher it is to say, I'm going to be the change agent when I get promoted to this, because I see that things need to change. But doing so means you're going to have to tell people that you have worked with for years and years, hey, sorry, but we're going to go in a different direction here. And you, again, like when you are going to change things, you have to do some of that. If you don't, it is just lip service that you're making a change, because you have to bring in some new ideas, bring in some new leadership to actually change things. You cannot just turn an organization around from inside with exactly the same people. And we talked about Brian Bridges, for example, being an example of that. But I do think that's a lot harder to do. And the key thing to me about a team like the Royals, we know that the Royals aren't going to have every advantage out there, right? There's no scenario where the Royals are like, the Dodgers are looking enviously over at the Royals and saying, oh, if we could just do things like the Royals do. But so you have to have things that you do really well. And it's not going to be everything. No organization does everything well. But we have seen, I think right now, a couple of things with the Royals that do stand out. Like when it comes to pitching, the last couple of years at the major league level, I feel like, especially on the starting pitching side, if you are able to shop in the, what I would describe the mid-tier or below in free agency and have success, that's a differentiator for you, because, you know, the Mets are really smart. The Mets have a lot of smart people, and the Mets did some success in that market 2 years ago. And then this year it utterly imploded on them with guys like Frankie Montas and all, right? So, and the Royals if the Royals made the mistakes on signing pitchers that the Mets did this year, they'd be sunk for multiple years because they don't have a $300 million payroll. So that's one thing that really stands out. And the other so I would say that's one, but the other thing that really, I know 82 and 80 is not the goal, right? I get it. Like there's no parades being held in Kansas City for the season, but and I've got to give the new ownership some credit on this too. The Reds and Royals, I wrote a column about this at the trade deadline. It's so encouraging to me to see teams, small market teams, lower revenue teams that try. Like the Royals tried at the deadline. Did it get them in the playoffs this year? No. Has it gotten in the playoffs in the past? Recently? Yes. But they did try. And to me, if I'm a fan, that is so much more encouraging than, you know, if I'm a Pirates fan, the Pirates have Paul Skeens. And I sit here, if you're a Pirates fan though, and you're like, we're at the deadline, we have no offense. And you go, okay, we're going to trade away a couple of bats. Okay. You're a fan, there has to be times to have something to grab hold of. And again, this is not where the Royals want to be, but at the same time, I would say, again, I'll ask you guys, I feel like where the Royals are now is kind of the best place that they've been since Big Blue Wave and 13, 14, 15, you know, kind of that era, from the standpoint of like, it's not implausible. Being in the Central helps, but it's not implausible right now for me to say, okay, how does the 2026 Royals team win 88 games, win 90 if everything breaks right? That's possible now. And that's where it felt like there was a stretch there where it's like, you could not plausibly lay that out, a case for that. And right now it doesn't require 17 things going right. Now, I don't think that they're anywhere like I think that there is definitely challenges. I think you look in the same organization, the Tigers, the Guardians are really pretty sharp, but it does feel like that steps have been made forward.
Yeah, I mean, Soren and I've talked about this. We feel like we're in a good place right now. Like we've been through a roller coaster just since we started this podcast 4 years ago, but it just feels like the Royals are in good hands, and that's not something that we have said a lot over the last generation or two. So I've got one more question for you. I have many questions for you, but we have time for one more. I'm going to try and limit it to one. But I have to ask you about this guy because I just feel like we've kind of forgotten about him. It's Blake Mitchell. And I feel like, based on the fact that Carter Jensen basically is was the same player coming in, left-handed hitting catcher with, good secondary skills, and lapped him while Blake broke his hamate bone in spring training. We knew that would affect him even after he came back with the lack of power. And that's borne out. And it's easy to look at him and be like, this guy's, he's a career 223 hitter in the minor leagues. The power was completely no power. Even in Arizona Fall League, he's playing there right now. Currently, he's slugging 308. But at the same time,
and that's a league where I think the league average is 320. So that's not great.
Yeah, and by the way, he's up to it.
So, but at the same time, it's like you look at that, and then you look at his on base percentage. It's his career OBP is 379. Like it's almost like someone's playing a joke on Soren and I, because for years all we have asked for is for the Royals to like embrace plate discipline and 3 true outcomes, and here comes this first round pick, top 10 pick, who's a catcher who's has 3 true outcomes as anybody who's anybody who's ever played for them. And like if you put these numbers, if you did this at the major league level, he's Mickey Tettleton, right? Who's like one of my all-time faves. And we all think he sucks, right? Because you do that in the minor leagues. It's like, well, if you hit 220 in the minors, you're not going to hit 220 in the majors. You're going to hit 140. There's no way to make that work. But at the same time, he just turned 21. And I'm just curious what you are hearing. And obviously the big caveat that he did have a broken bone he was coming back from his hand, that it typically saps your power for a year or so. Is there still hope for this guy? Because the plate discipline seems real. And I'm just curious, what can he be?
The plate discipline is extremely real, right? Like, and that's something where when we talk about how we can do things better now than we could, like you get an A ball and it's like, if you look at walk rate, I mean, again, walk rate in A ball can be, I put bat on shoulder, good things happen. That's not him, right? He's swinging the bat about 40% of the time, which is, I would say, patient, but not I just don't swing kind of patience. It's just that he does not swing outside the zone. It is like a 17% chase rate, which is really good, right? So we start with, that is a real 100% a skill he has, and one that is unlikely to disappear as he climbs the ladder. It's not something where he's just taking advantage of bad pitching. He knows the strike zone. He hits the ball hard when he hits it. Even this year, even though the numbers didn't, like the EVs and all were good, he misses way too much in the zone. And that's one of those, okay, which is it, right? Is that something he can improve? Or is that something, when I say improve, I don't think that there's any logical path where we're talking about, okay, well, if Blake Mitchell could really improve that and became a 280 hitter, then he'd be 280, 400, 450. And what is that as a catcher? That's an all-star. But no, like if he can keep steadily improving that to where it never becomes the derailing factor that keeps him from being what he can be, right? Like he's a catcher. So the good news, number one, is like catchers really, to me, I need to study this more, but the development path of catchers as hitters often to me feels like it can be 2 to 3 to 4 years delayed, which does make sense because when you talk to catchers, they do talk about the fact of just how hard it is to do the job and how long it can take to just figure out how to sustain yourself doing the job. Because especially if you're a good catcher, the whole old cliche of like, he went 0 for 3 and he had a great game because he called a great game and he threw out 2 runners and he helped the pitcher get through the 6th and all that is 100% true, right? Like as a catcher, you have so many responsibilities. You're a first baseman. Okay, I fielded the ball successfully today and I hit. That's your job. If you're a catcher, it's like you have so many jobs, and it does take guys a lot of time to figure that out. You can find the catchers who were not hitters until they were 25, 26, 27, and then all of a sudden they click. Yadier Molina, if we don't take string example, he obviously moved quicker, but like look at Yadier Molina's minor league batting average to major league batting average has to be one of the biggest disparities you'll ever find, because he was a guy who had some, and early in his big league career, like if you just said when Yadier Molina was coming up that this guy was going to be a 300 hitter, you'd have never believed it. Great defense, you would have believed, but not 300 hitter. And so as a catcher, like there's a lot of reason to say, give him some time, especially for a guy who's had injuries and is 20. The thing I will say about it is like the good news for the Royals is there's a 100% reason to be patient, because they're not looking at him now saying, who do we have to catch? Because we just talked about Carter Jensen. Like this is something where his path can be at the rate that he needs to develop, as long as you get through the Rule 5 protection and the options and all that. But that's for him. We're still talking years down the road. I would say like we are cautiously still very optimistic because the things you just laid out. You don't find catchers who could catch, who have the ability to walk and hit for power like he does, if it all clicks. But at the same time, he's not a top 100 prospect anymore because we got to see some of that. Plate discipline's great, but we got to have some other components too.
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of Royals fans now with Carter Jensen like, trade Blake Mitchell. Trade Blake, get hot so we can trade Blake Mitchell. And
again, like the thing with that is that big league teams are now, that used to be that there were about 3 or 4 teams that were kind of the marks that you could kind of try that with. That doesn't work anymore. Nowadays, everyone's
until the Rockies hire a GM, it's like,
yeah, they're the.
If general managers keep turning them down, which is apparently what the rumors are coming out of Colorado,
assistant general managers turning them down.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Yeah. That's always a rough spot. Hey JJ, thanks so much with your time. You're so generous with it. We're huge fans of Baseball America, the Bible of all things baseball, the prospect list. I know you're working on those. Those are going to be coming out for the top 10s. Then of course the Bible of prospects, the baseball prospect handbook will be coming out around the corner. That's a great holiday gift for people. If you got a baseball fan on your list, just a Baseball America subscription is a great holiday gift for everybody. The great work that they do. There's so much. If you love the game of baseball, Baseball America is just a treat that you get all the time. So
December 9th, we're rolling out the Royals top 10 will be December 9th on the site. And then I will give the little bit of a plug, which is if you order the prospect handbook from us, I personally will be sending you a PDF version of it in early January. So, so it is nice. Like the print version will be out, usually ships from us about a month before Amazon and all, but that's like in February, but you will have it in your hands in early January. 30 scouting reports for all 30 teams.
Oh, well, there you go. You just made my day. I'll be ordering here shortly. So
he'll be scheduling his fantasy draft for like the day after that drops.
I will say the way I discovered Baseball America myself was I was in an Apple league in the 90s. And the great thing about back then is I could be in the 7th round still drafting top 100 prospects because there was so much less info and less knowledge about it. Yes. They were drafting off the cards in the big leagues, and I was drafting off like this Sean Green guy is going to be really good. This Jim Thome, I'm going to really clean up on him, even though he batted $140 this year.
I'm almost embarrassed by like the drafts I had in my Stratomatic league in college because I had a Baseball America subscription, and presumably none of my competitors did. It was amusing.
At one point, now I didn't have great pitching, but at one point my team did have, and we were like an 18-team league. So like, it wasn't like we had 12 teams or whatever, but I believe that I had Mike Piazza behind the plate, Mark McGuire, and Jim Thome at first base, Barry Larkin at shortstop. And my defense wasn't great, but like, when you have that in the middle of the lineup, you're going to be okay.
You're looking pretty good. By the way, we're always brought to you by our great sponsors, Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Those seal coating dates are booking up fast, so book now. GannAsphalt.com, one contractor, all things parking lot, and of course our friends at Whataburger. For a limited time, you can get the Bacon Wrangler double. You can check out the sweet and spicy bacon burger. They've got so many great choices for you. The patty melt, my personal favorite. Check it out right now. Whataburger's open 24 hours, including serving breakfast from 11 p.m. to 11 a.m. We want to thank again JJ Cooper for joining us here, and thank you for joining Rany, Jazayerli, and myself